King Ahasuerus was a very powerful man. Not really a brilliant man, but a powerful man. So powerful was he that if you should have made the mistake of walking into the courts of his palace without being invited, he could have you put to death on the spot. So powerful was he that when his first wife Vashti refused to dance wearing the royal regalia for a dinner party of the king for his guests, he had her banished from his sight. His advisors were satisfied that that would teach the women of Persia that a man was the lord of his own house. Yes, the king was a powerful man, but now he needed a new wife. And so, out of the capital city of Susa, an edict went forth. Let all the eligible young women of the land be brought together into one place, for the king seeks a new wife. And out of all the young and beautiful and eligible women of Persia, one found the king's favor, Hadassah, or Esther. Now, what the king knew about Esther was that she was beautiful. And what the king knew about Esther was she was pleasing. And what the king knew about Esther was that after the weeks of perfumed baths they'd been giving her, that she smelled really good. But what the king didn't know about Esther was that she was smart and that she was brave. And what the king especially didn't know about Esther was that she was Jewish. Esther had lived in the home of her uncle Mordecai since she had lost her parents when their families were taken on one of the Persian raids. And so when Esther moved to the palace of the king, then Uncle Mordecai took to spending time at the palace, walking in front of the court of the harem in the hope of catching word, learning how his niece was faring. And it was because of this that Mordecai caught wind of a plot to assassinate the king. It seemed that two of the king's servants, two eunuchs who guarded the threshold named Bigthan and Teresh, that they were angry at the king and that they planned to kill him. When Mordecai learned of this as a devoted and loyal subject, he sent word to Esther, and she sent word to the king in the name of Mordecai. And when the matter was investigated and the two were found to be guilty, they were hanged on the gallows. It was all recorded in the book of the annals, the chronicle of the land, in the presence of the king. And Mordecai, he was a hero for like 5 minutes. Now, after these things, the king promoted one of his officials. He advanced him and lifted him above all his other officials. The man's name was Haman. Haman was not a good man. Haman was an evil man. Haman didn't care about the king. Haman didn't care about the kingdom. Haman cared about only one thing. Haman. He wanted nothing so much as that people would bow down to him as he walked by in the streets, which by and large, people did. That is, all except one man, Mordecai. I bow down to no man, said Mordecai. I bow down to God alone. Oh, how that angered Haman. Oh, Mordecai, he said, Mordecai, how I hate him. How I would like to be rid of him. And the more he thought of it, the more he wanted to be rid of not only Mordecai, but all the Jewish people. In the first month of the year, the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of the reign of King Ahasuerus, Haman and his servants cast pur. They cast lots to determine the day and the month that such a thing would take place. And the lot fell upon the 13th day of the 12th month. That's the month of Adar. And so Haman approached the king. Your Majesty, I have a concern to share with you. There is a certain people in your kingdom. They're spread out and separated throughout all the provinces of your land. They're not the same as us. They're foreigners. They have their own laws. I'm sure I would not presume to tell the king what he should do about such a problem. I'm sure I have no ideas, except for perhaps if it pleased the king, he could issue a decree for their destruction. I don't know. It's just a suggestion. I myself would be willing to put 10,000 shekels of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's finances, and they could put it into the king's bank. The king took the signet ring from his finger, and he handed it to Haman. The money's given to you and to the people to do with as you think is good. So the king's secretaries were summoned on the 13th day of the first month of the year. And an edict, according to all that Haman had commanded, was written to all the governors over all the provinces, to all the officials over all the people, to every province in its own script, to every people in their own language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus, and it was sealed with his signet ring. Letters were sent giving orders to destroy, to kill, to annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on one day, the 13th day of the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. And when the king and Haman had done this thing, they sat down to drink, and the whole city was plunged into chaos. When Mordecai heard the cry that rose up from the city, he tore his robes and he dressed in sackcloth and ashes, wailing with a loud and bitter cry. Everywhere where the king's decree came, the cry rose up from the Jewish people in great mourning and grief. Mordecai sent word to Esther, "You must do something to stop this calamity." Esther sent word back to him, "Uncle Mordecai, every subject and every servant knows that no one may enter the king's courts without being invited, or they will be put to death. Only if he extends the golden scepter may they be saved. Don't think that because I'm the queen, I'm any safer than anybody else from this law." Mordecai said to her, "My niece, don't think that because you are the queen, that you are any safer than any of us from the thing that will befall all of your people." Then he said, "Who knows? Maybe it is for such a time as this that you have risen to royal dignity." Esther said, "Have the people fast and pray for 3 days and 3 nights. I'll do the same with my maids. After 3 days, I'll go in to the king, and if I perish, I perish." And so Mordecai did as Esther commanded. He fasted and he prayed with the people, and Esther did the same. After 3 days and 3 nights, Esther put on the royal robes, and she came into the king's palace and stood in the courtyard, in the courts, facing the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne facing the entrance. When he saw Esther walk into the courts of the palace uninvited, she found his favor. And he extended the golden scepter. Esther approached him and she touched the top of the scepter. "What would you have, my queen?" "Anything, even half my kingdom," he said. "If it pleases your majesty, and if I found any favor in his sight, I would invite your majesty and Haman to a banquet this evening that I have prepared in honor of the king." "Wonderful," said the king. "Excellent," said Haman. And so the two of them hurried to the dinner. And when they had feasted and the wine had flowed copiously, the king turned to the queen and he said, "Now, my queen, what is your petition? What do you want? Even anything, half my kingdom." And Esther said, If it pleases your majesty, and if I found any favor in his sight, I would invite the king to another banquet tomorrow night in his honor. Super, said the king. Outstanding, said Haman. Now, Haman went home happy, and he told his neighbors and his wife Zeresh about all the splendors of the palace and how the king had advanced him and honored him with power. Why, the queen invited only me to accompany the king to a banquet in our honor. In fact, I'm invited tomorrow night to another banquet. Still, all of this does me no good so long as I continue to see Mordecai the Jew sitting outside the king's gate. How I wish I could be rid of him. Oh, said the neighbors and his wife, that's easy. Just have a gallows like 50 feet high built there in the town square, and then ask the king to have him hanged, and then go to the queen's banquet in good spirits. Haman liked this advice, and so he had the gallows built. Now, whether there had been a little too much spice in the royal falafels or whether the wine had flowed just a little too copiously, it's hard to say. But for whatever reason, the king had some difficulty sleeping that night. And so, as he walked around in the palace in his royal pajamas, he asked for some reading. And he was given the book of the annals, the chronicle of the land. And as he read, he found a troubling thing. It seemed that there had been a man who had saved his life, and there was no record of his having been honored at all. So he turned to a servant and he said, "What has been done for the man who saved my life?" His servant said, "Nothing has been done." The next morning, Haman came early to the courts of the palace to talk to the king about having Mordecai hanged. But before he could say a thing, the king said to him, "What shall be done for the man the king wishes to honor?" Haman thought, "He's talking about me. He has to be talking about me. Who else would he be talking about? Oh, your majesty, I'm sure I have no idea. I would not presume to say to the king what should happen for such an important man. But perhaps the king could find a horse that the king himself has ridden, take the king's royal robes, place the man upon the horse, put the robes upon the man, put the crown on the horse, and have one of the king's finest officials conduct him about town, crying out, 'Thus shall it be done for the man the king wishes to honor.'" I don't know, it's just a suggestion. "Perfect," said the king. "Then that you shall do for the man Mordecai. Don't leave out a single thing." That is what Haman had to do. Put Mordecai on the royal horse and conduct him about town, saying, "Thus shall it be done for the man the king wishes to honor." Nevertheless, he attended the queen's banquet. And the food was sumptuous, and the wine flowed freely. And when they had eaten and drunk, the king turned to the queen and he said, "Now, my queen, what will you have? Anything, even half my kingdom, it is yours." Queen Esther said, "If it pleases your majesty, and if I found any favor in his sight, I would ask for the life of my people. For we have all been sold to be killed, to be destroyed, to be annihilated, for we are Jews." The king said, "Huh? Who is he and where is he who has done this thing?" he said. Esther said, "It is the evil, the wicked Haman." The king was overcome with rage. He stormed out of the palace, out into the royal gardens. Haman was terrified of the king and the queen. He threw himself upon the queen to ask for mercy, but the king re-entered and saw him on his wife. "Oh, is it enough that you have betrayed me?" he said. "Now you are assailing my wife. What do we do with a traitor?" The servant said, "Do we not have a gallows?" "Take him away," he said. And they took away Haman and they hanged him on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. And my brothers and my sisters, on that day, Haman, the enemy of the Jewish people, was punished for his wickedness. And on that day, Esther, brave Queen Esther, became the hero of her people.